This is the story of a man who thought his life was already decided. Richard Thompson, 50 years old, self-made CEO, a big house in the suburbs, a loyal wife, 2 kids, a life that looked perfect from the outside. For years, he walked the same safe path. Work, meetings, deals, family dinners. No scandals, no big mistakes. Just slow, steady success. But on a rainy night in a downtown hotel, that changed. At the company's anniversary party, Richard meets Emily Ward, 28, smart, beautiful, ambitious. She doesn't just notice his power, she knows exactly how to use it. One drink turns into a long conversation. One elevator ride turns into a choice. And one choice becomes a secret that can't be undone. In this episode, we watch the moment a successful man crosses a line he never planned to cross. And the days after, when the office looks the same, but every glance, every message, every quiet conversation pulls him deeper into a dangerous connection. This is episode 1, The Night It All Began. Part 1, The First Night in the Rain. The rain had been falling all evening. From the 24th floor of the downtown hotel, Richard Thompson watched it slide down the tall glass windows in shining streaks. The city outside was a blur of red brake lights and smeared neon. Inside, the air smelled like expensive perfume, wine, and polished wood. He stood a little apart from the crowd, a glass of red wine in his hand, the noise of the corporate anniversary party humming behind him, laughter, clinking glasses, a band playing something upbeat that people pretended to enjoy. 15 years. 15 years since he had signed the first small contract that would become Thompson Development. At 50, Richard was the picture of success. Dark gray suit, silver at his temples, shoulders still straight. He owned a mid-sized construction and real estate firm that everyone in town knew. He had a large house in the suburbs, a wife who had stood by him since the days of shared ramen and overdue rent, 2 kids, a life people envied. And yet, as he looked out at the rain, he felt strangely empty. He did not say that out loud, of course. Men like him rarely did. "Trying to escape your own party, Mr. Thompson?" The voice came from behind him, light, amused. Richard turned. Emily Ward was walking toward him, heels quiet on the carpet, a cocktail glass in her hand. She wore a fitted black dress that ended just above the knee, simple and elegant, and a pair of small silver earrings that caught the light when she moved. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat, effortless style that looked like it had taken a long time. She looked younger in the warm light of the hotel lounge, but not young in the naive way. At 28, Emily carried herself like someone who already knew the rules of the game and had no intention of staying in the cheap seats. Richard forced a small smile. "Just needed a minute away from the noise," he said. "Too many speeches, too much music. Comes with the tradition, I guess." Emily stepped beside him, close enough that he could smell the faint citrus of her perfume over the scent of his wine. "From what I saw, they loved your speech," she said. "Half the room was staring at you like you were a movie star." "They were staring at the free open bar," Richard replied. Emily laughed softly. It was not a loud, forced laugh. It was low, like the way the band's bass carried through the floor. "Humility looks good on you," she said. "But you know that's not true." He looked back out at the city, trying to keep his eyes away from the gentle curve of her shoulder in his peripheral vision. Emily had joined the company 3 months earlier, transferred into the project development team from a firm on the other side of town. The first time Richard saw her, she had been standing in a conference room, pointing to a slide on a screen, presenting a detailed market analysis to 3 senior managers who could barely keep their attention on the numbers. They remembered the numbers later. They remembered her sooner. People talked, as they always did. Smart girl. Too pretty to be real. That one's going places, if she plays her cards right. Richard had heard the comments, but he had not thought much about them. He had been in this world long enough to recognize office gossip and to ignore most of it. Until tonight. Emily leaned one hand lightly on the window ledge, watching the glowing streets below. "I like nights like this," she said. "Cold and wet?" Richard asked. "Slippery," she answered, turning her head toward him. "When it rains, people stay out later than they should. They drink a little more. They go home a little later. They make decisions they've been too careful to make on clear days." Richard's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. Just a fraction. "You sound like you've done a study on it," he said. "Oh, no," Emily replied. "Just observing people. It's kind of a hobby." Her eyes met his. They were a warm brown, but there was nothing soft about them. There was focus in that gaze, and something else he could not quite name. She nodded toward his left hand. "You've got a ring," she said. "I know your wife's name is Laura. I saw her in a picture in your office." He followed her gaze to his wedding band, the simple gold circle that had been on his finger for more than 2 decades. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Must be nice," Emily said. "A long marriage, a beautiful house, kids, everything in place." There was no sarcasm in her tone. If anything, it sounded almost thoughtful. Still, something in the way she said "in place" made Richard think of furniture that had been arranged in a room years ago and never moved since. "You don't sound convinced," he said. Emily gave a small shrug. "I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment," she said. "My parents fought over money until they finally just got tired and walked away from each other. I guess I learned early that 'in place' can mean stuck." Richard looked at her again. He had read the brief notes from HR when she was hired. Strong academic record, fast promotions, praised for results. "Tough background," one of the managers had added informally. "She's hungry." "How about you?" she asked. "Are you happy where you are?" It was a bold question. Most junior employees would not ask their CEO that. Richard took a moment to answer. "I have a good life," he said. "More than I ever thought I'd have when I was starting out. That's enough." Emily watched him closely, as if weighing those words. "Sometimes, enough is just a word we tell ourselves," she said quietly, "so we don't have to admit we still want something else." Before Richard could reply, a younger manager hurried over to them. "Mr. Thompson, they're ready for the group photo with the partners," he said. "We're just waiting on you." Richard nodded, set his glass down on the small round table by the window, and straightened his jacket. "Duty calls," he said to Emily. "It usually does," she replied, with a hint of a smile. As he turned to go, she said, almost casually, "By the way, after the party, if you don't feel like driving home in this rain alone, I'll be at the bar on the 10th floor for a while. I heard they make a decent old-fashioned down there." She did not wait for his answer. Emily just gave him one last look, calm, sure of herself, then blended back into the crowd of polished shoes and sequin dresses. Richard walked away, but he felt the weight of that invitation like an extra object in his pocket. The party lasted longer than planned. It always did. There were toasts from partners and clients, speeches from managers, a short video about the company's history that made Richard look younger and more determined than he remembered. People came up to him with firm handshakes and big smiles, telling him that his story inspired them, that they were proud to be part of the team, that the future was bright. He said all the right things in return. "Thank you. We couldn't have done it without you. We're just getting started." By the time he managed to slip away, it was almost midnight. The hallway outside the ballroom was much quieter. The carpet muffled his steps. His head buzzed a little from the mix of wine, champagne, and a long day. His phone vibrated in his pocket. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text. "Still at the bar on 10. Unless you changed your mind." Richard stared at the screen. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway waited with their polished steel faces. He could picture his house, the warm light in the kitchen that Laura always left on for him, the old couch where his daughter, Chloe, liked to study with her music playing in her ears, the framed graduation photo of Ethan on the wall by the stairs. He could also picture the 10th floor, a quieter bar, dimmer lights, Emily's dress, the line of her shoulders, the way she had looked at him when she asked if he was happy. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked toward the elevator. His finger hovered for a second over the button marked L for lobby. Then, very slowly, he moved it and pressed 10 instead. The bar on the 10th floor was not crowded. Soft jazz played in the background. The lighting was low, amber, and warm. A few couples sat at small tables. A businessman in a suit checked his phone at the counter. Emily was by the windows again, as if she gravitated naturally toward glass and views. A half-finished drink sat in front of her, clear with a twist of orange peel. She looked up as Richard approached. That small, knowing smile returned to her lips, subtle but unmistakable. "I was starting to think you went home after all," she said. "Got delayed," he replied. "Too many people who wanted to say the same 3 nice things." "Success has a price," Emily said. "Sit down. Let me buy you a drink for once. Happy anniversary." He almost protested out of habit, then decided to let it go. "Old-fashioned, right?" she asked, raising a hand to catch the bartender's eye. He nodded. "You have a good memory," he said. "It's not memory," Emily replied. "It's observation. You always order the same thing at company events. Same drink, same joke about getting too old for loud music. Same polite exit at 11:30. She tilted her head. "Tonight, you are off schedule." The bartender brought the drinks. They clinked glasses lightly. "To 15 years, Emily said. "To the people who survived them," Richard added. They drank. Conversation came easily, or at least it seemed that way. Emily talked about her childhood in a small town in the Midwest, about watching her mother count each dollar at the kitchen table, about the first time she saw a skyscraper on a school trip and decided she wanted to be part of building something that big. "I used to walk downtown and stare up at the buildings," she said. "I'd pick the nicest one and think, someone owns that. Someone decided what that lobby looks like. Someone signed a deal that made all that marble possible. I wanted to be that someone, or at least sit in the same room." Richard listened. There were places in her story that reminded him of his own small beginnings, stubborn ambition, the refusal to stay in the place life first puts you. You've done well, he said. You're good at what you do. That's why you're here. I appreciate that, Emily answered. But we both know talent doesn't always translate into power or safety. I've seen people work themselves to the bone and still get laid off because they're in the wrong place when the numbers go red. She ran a fingertip around the rim of her glass. I don't want to be at the mercy of someone else's decision, she said. Not ever again. She said it simply, but there was steel in those words. You don't have to cut corners to get ahead, Richard said. If you put in the work. I do put in the work, Emily interrupted gently. You've seen my reports. You know I do. But let's be honest, Richard. It was the first time she had used his first name. People like you, she said, at the top. Do you really think you got there only because of hard work? No timing? No risks? No deals that maybe blurred a line or two along the way? Richard hesitated. He remembered a handshake in a half-empty diner 15 years ago. A loan taken at the last possible moment. A contract signed before all the permits were technically ready. He remembered hoping nothing would go wrong, praying that if it did, no one would look too closely. Business isn't clean, he said slowly. Not if you want to survive. But there's a difference between taking a risk and throwing everything away. Emily smiled at him over the rim of her glass. I agree, she said. The key is knowing which risks are worth it. Their eyes held for a moment. The rain tapped softly on the windows around them, a distant hiss against the glass. After a while, the conversation drifted to lighter things. Funny stories from the office, strange clients, the worst coffee in the building. They laughed. He found himself telling her about the early days of the company, about a time when his office had been a corner of a noisy shared space with a broken air conditioner. Emily listened with genuine interest. She asked sharp questions, made smart comments. She made him feel, for the first time in a long while, like he was not just a symbol in a suit, but a person with a story worth hearing. Time slipped. The bartender cleared away empty glasses. The couple in the corner left. The businessman checked his watch and headed out. By the time Richard glanced at his phone again, it was well past midnight. I should probably go, he said. My wife will wonder if I fell asleep in a conference room. Emily leaned back in her chair, tilting her head just a little. You texted her you were with clients, didn't you? She asked. He did not answer, but his silence was enough. Emily's smile softened, losing some of its sharpness. I'm not judging you, she said. I just know how these nights usually go. The party, the drinks, the celebration, the careful lie on the way home. She picked up her small clutch bag from the table. It's late, she said. I should head back too. They stood up at the same time. In the elevator, they were the only two people inside. The doors closed with a soft chime. The car began to move downward. Richard watched the numbers light up above the doors. Emily's reflection stood beside his in the mirrored wall. Calm, composed. Which floor? He asked. 4, she said. They put me there for tonight. It was cheaper for the company than reimbursing a late-night ride home. He pressed the button. There was a hum of machinery. The numbers kept descending. Thank you for the drink, he said after a moment. For the conversation. Thank you for not being boring, Emily replied. That's rare at these things. The elevator stopped at 4 with a small shudder. The doors slid open. Emily did not step out right away. She turned toward him instead. "You know," she said, "you still look like a man who doesn't really want to go home yet." It was a soft statement, not an accusation. Richard felt his heartbeat slow and then pick up again. An odd double rhythm. "What makes you say that?" he asked. Emily took half a step closer. Not enough to be inappropriate on its own, but enough that he could feel the warmth coming off her skin, see the faint shimmer of makeup at the corner of her eye. "Because you pressed 10 before you pressed 4, she said. "Because you're here, with me, instead of in a car on the highway back to the suburbs. Because when you talk about the beginning of your company, your eyes light up more than when you talk about your life now." Her voice dropped a little lower. "And because you haven't stopped looking at my mouth for the last 30 seconds. He had not realized he was doing that. Or maybe he had, but had chosen not to admit it to himself. Silence filled the small space between them, thicker than the hotel carpet. Emily broke it. "You can step out now," she said, nodding toward the hallway. "Go back to being the responsible husband in the nice house. This can just be a long talk after a long party. No harm done." She paused. "Or," she added, "you can do something off schedule tonight." Her words hung in the air like the last notes of a song. Richard looked at the open elevator door. A short hallway, anonymous hotel art on the walls, identical doors with identical numbers. He thought of Laura's face when she laughed, of Chloe bent over her textbooks, of Ethan sending him excited emails about business plans. Then he looked back at Emily. Her eyes were steady. There was no desperation there, no pleading. This was not a trap in the way inexperienced men sometimes imagined. It was something colder and more honest, an invitation with consequences. He knew that clearly. He also knew he had already crossed some invisible line simply by coming this far. The elevator chimed a soft reminder, like a polite cough. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good night, Richard," she said. She turned to step out. Without planning to, without even feeling the impulse form into a decision, he reached out and touched her wrist. It was a light touch. He could have said it was accidental. He didn't. Emily looked down at his hand, then up at his face. His voice, when it came, surprised even him. "Which room?" he asked. For a second, there was no sound but the quiet hum of the elevator. Then she told him. The hallway to Emily's room was quiet. Their footsteps sounded almost too loud on the carpet as they walked. Richard's mind felt strangely detached, as if he were watching himself from just behind his own shoulder. He noticed small details, the way the wallpaper pattern repeated every few feet, the soft buzz of a light fixture near the elevator, the faint smell of cleaning chemicals and air freshener. At her door, Emily slid her keycard into the slot. There was a click, a small green light. She turned the handle, then looked back at him. "You still have time to change your mind," she said. He did not move. She opened the door and stepped inside first, flicking on a lamp by the bed. Warm, yellow light spilled into the room. It was a standard hotel room. Neat bed, neutral artwork, a small armchair by the window. Everything designed to look comfortable and to be forgotten by morning. Richard stood on the threshold for a heartbeat longer. Then he stepped in and let the door close behind him with a soft, final sound. The rain was still falling outside, tapping its steady rhythm against the glass. Later, when he would try to remember the exact moment when his life began to tilt, he would think of that sound, the rain on the window, the muffled city, Emily's quiet voice as she said his name in the dim light. He would tell himself that it had been just one night, just one slip in a long record of responsibility, that he had been tired, that he had been drunk, that he had not meant for it to go so far. But the truth was simpler. On that first night in the rain, Richard Thompson walked willingly into a room he could have walked past. He chose the risk, even if he did not yet understand the cost. Emily Ward, standing a few steps inside with the light at her back, watched him cross the carpet with calm, measuring eyes. This was not an accident for her. For Emily, this was the first move in a plan she had been quietly building long before the rain began to fall. Part 2. Office Glances and Hidden Messages. Morning came with a hangover made of more than alcohol. Richard woke in his own bed, in his own house, to the pale light of a gray Saturday sliding through the curtains. For a moment, before memory caught up, he felt the familiar weight of routine, the soft hum of the heater, the faint smell of coffee from downstairs, the quiet of a house that had not fully woken yet. Then it all rushed back. The hotel, the 10th floor, Emily's room, her voice in the dark, too close to his ear. He stared up at the ceiling, his chest tight. Beside him, Laura was asleep on her side, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one hand tucked under her cheek. She had left the bedside lamp off. The room was full of that dim, bluish morning color that never looked quite real. Richard turned his head slightly and watched her for a few seconds. They had met in college. She used to fall asleep with open textbooks across her chest, highlighter marks on her fingers, insisting she would wake up in 20 minutes and keep studying. She never did. He would gently take the book away, slide a blanket over her, and she would murmur his name and smile without opening her eyes. Now there were faint lines at the corners of her mouth. Her hair had a few strands of gray mixed in. He knew the shape of her breathing as well as he knew the layout of his office. Last night, he had texted her, "Big night. Clients here late. Don't wait up. Love you." She had replied, "Okay. Be safe. Proud of you. Love you too." Richard closed his eyes. The words pricked at him now. He got up quietly, so as not to wake her, and went to the bathroom. The man in the mirror looked like something between the CEO from the company video and the husband in the family photos. He turned on the faucet and splashed water on his face, trying to wash away the hotel room, the warmth of unfamiliar sheets, the taste of old-fashioned and citrus, and something else on his tongue. Just one mistake, he told himself silently. One night. It doesn't have to be more than that. He dried his face, breathed in deep, and walked downstairs. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toasted bread. Ethan sat at the table, laptop open, a half-eaten bagel on a plate next to him. He wore a hoodie from his college and had that look of someone half in the real world, half inside a spreadsheet. "Morning," Richard said. "Hey, Dad." Ethan glanced up, then did a double take. "You look tired." "Late night," Richard replied, moving to the coffee maker. "Party went longer than I planned." "Yeah, I saw pictures all over the company Instagram," Ethan said. "They did the whole red carpet thing. Very Hollywood." Richard poured himself coffee, focusing on the stream in the mug. "Where's your sister?" he asked. Upstairs, Ethan said, grumbling about a math quiz on Monday. You know, standard Chloe drama. He smiled a little when he said it. There was affection in the teasing. Richard sat down at the table, the warmth of the coffee seeping into his hands. You nervous about starting at the company? He asked. Ethan shook his head, then nodded, then shrugged. A little, he admitted. It's different doing projects in school and then doing real stuff with real money on the line. Also, people keep making comments about the boss's son, and I haven't even started yet. You'll be fine, Richard said. You'll start in project analysis. You'll earn their respect the same way everyone else does. He believed that. He also knew people would watch every step Ethan took and measure it against his own shadow. Footsteps came down the stairs. Laura walked into the kitchen in a soft sweater and jeans, tying her hair back into a loose ponytail. Morning, she said, and leaned over to kiss Richard on the cheek. The simple, familiar gesture made something inside his chest clench. How was the party? She asked, moving to the counter. Did the slideshow with the bad photos of your early days go over well? Yep, he said. Everyone loved seeing me with terrible hair and a cheap tie. I liked that tie, Laura replied. It was from the discount bin, but it made you look very serious. Ethan made a face. Please don't talk about Dad's ties from the last century, he said. It hurts my soul. Laura swatted him lightly on the shoulder with a dish towel. They laughed. The kitchen filled with ordinary sounds. The clink of dishes, the beep of the toaster, the low hum of Ethan's laptop fan. Richard watched them both and felt, for a strange moment, like he was sitting in front of a movie he had seen 100 times. He knew his lines. He knew their lines. He could have closed his eyes and still predicted what would be said next. Laura poured herself coffee and sat down. So? She said casually. How late did you stay? I woke up at 1 and you weren't home yet. Richard lifted his mug to his lips. His heartbeat picked up. Pretty late, he said. Some clients wanted to discuss a new project. They flew in just for the event. I couldn't exactly kick them out right after the cake. Of course, Laura said. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the swirl. For a second, he thought she might ask something else. Where, exactly? Who, exactly? But she didn't. Instead, she smiled. I'm just glad you got home safe, she said. Rain like that, people drive like idiots. Relief washed through him. It felt sour. He forced a smile in return. Yeah, he said. They do. Monday came faster than he wanted. By 8:30, Richard was back in his office on the 19th floor of the Thompson Development Building, wearing another dark suit, another crisp shirt, the ring still on his finger. The office had that particular morning smell. Coffee, paper, a faint trace of printer toner. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. The glass walls of conference rooms reflected people moving around like pieces on a chessboard. He dropped his briefcase by his desk and turned on his computer. Overnight emails appeared in a flood. Questions from site managers, financial updates, polite notes from clients who had so enjoyed the wonderful anniversary celebration. He answered the most urgent ones first, letting the rhythm of work pull him in, trying to let it erase everything else. A soft knock came at his open door. Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Emily stood there, a folder in her hand. She wore a light blouse and a pencil skirt, professional and simple, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. If someone had taken a picture of her right then, they could have put it in a corporate brochure under the words, "Our People." Richard felt a small, involuntary jolt in his chest. It didn't show on his face. He had practiced that control for years. "Good morning," he said. "Come in." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Not all the way, but enough that the sounds of the hallway dimmed. "I brought the projections for the Westbrook project," she said, holding out the folder. "I made some adjustments after seeing the numbers from last quarter." He took it, keeping his fingers from brushing hers. "Thank you," he said. For a moment, they just stood there. The air between them felt thicker than it had any right to be. "How was your weekend?" Emily asked, her tone neutral. "Busy," he replied. "You?" She gave a tiny smile. "Quiet," she said. "Plenty of time to think." Their eyes met. In that look, the hotel room existed again, even though no one said a word about it. Richard looked down at the folder. "Your work on Westbrook has been strong," he said, keeping his voice in the safe territory of business. "I've noticed." "I'm glad," Emily said. "It's an important project." He flipped through the pages. The projections were indeed sharp, the analysis clear and thorough. She had a good mind for numbers and risk. "There's a meeting with senior staff at 10, he said. "You should be there. I'd like you to present these adjustments." Her eyes widened, just slightly. "That's usually just directors," she said. "You're the one who put this together," he replied. "You should be in the room." He told himself it was the rational thing to do, rewarding talent, developing promising staff. It had nothing to do with the part of him that wanted an excuse to see her more, to hear her voice, to anchor whatever had happened Friday night to something that looked like professionalism. "Okay," Emily said. "I'll be there." She turned to go, then paused with her hand on the door handle. "If you're worried," she said quietly, "I'm not going to say anything about Friday." Richard's fingers tightened on the folder. "I'm not worried," he answered. Emily glanced back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Of course," she said. "You're never worried. That's part of the brand." She opened the door and stepped out, leaving it slightly ajar. He exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding. The 10 o'clock meeting filled the large conference room with senior managers, department heads, and the low hum of idle chatter as people waited for the last few to arrive. Richard sat at the head of the table, reviewing a summary report on his tablet. To his right, Mark Jensen, the CFO, sipped black coffee and scrolled through his own documents. Mark had been with the company almost as long as Richard had. The two of them had survived more lean years and close calls than either liked to count. "Big night on Friday," Mark said without looking up. "Saw you on the local news. They love that self-made man angle." "Gotta give 'em something to talk about," Richard replied. Mark grunted. "Press is good until it isn't," he said. "Remember the Harborview story? One worker falls off a scaffold and suddenly we're on every channel." Richard nodded. He remembered. He also remembered the late-night meetings with lawyers after that. The door opened. Emily entered, carrying her laptop and a stack of notes. A few heads turned. This was not her usual crowd. She took a seat halfway down the table, not trying to be invisible but not demanding attention either. Mark leaned toward Richard. "New blood?" he asked. "Project analysis," Richard said. She has insight on Westbrook. I want her in the discussion. If she can keep us from losing money, bring in a marching band, Mark replied. The meeting began. They covered 2 projects first, then moved to Westbrook, a mixed-use complex that could either be a huge win or a headache for years. Emily, Richard said, walk us through your revised projections. She connected her laptop to the screen. The room lights dimmed slightly. Her presentation was focused, clear. She spoke in steady, measured sentences that never rambled, her slides clean and to the point. She pointed out small shifts in market trends that others had missed. She highlighted potential partners with better financing terms. She suggested a phased approach that would reduce risk. As she talked, Richard noticed the way some of the older managers, skeptical at first, began to nod. Mark asked a couple of tough questions. Emily answered them without flinching. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Mark said, "That's actually very good." A small ripple of dry laughter went around the table. "We'd be stupid not to look into those financing options," he added. Richard watched Emily. She did not beam or glow or look around for praise. She just sat down, took a small sip of water, and waited. "We'll study your plan in detail," Richard said. "Thank you, Emily." He moved on to the next item on the agenda. But everyone in that room knew they had just seen someone step out of the background and into the circle that mattered. The rest of the week unfolded with an odd mix of normal and not. On the surface, life went on as usual. Richard attended meetings, signed documents, fielded calls from site supervisors about delays and weather and permits. He drove home through traffic, listened to Chloe talk about college applications, gave Ethan advice on how to handle difficult professors. He sat on the couch with Laura and watched a show they had both seen before. Underneath, threads were being pulled. On Tuesday, Emily sent him an email after hours. "I found a discrepancy in the Westbrook supplier pricing quotes. Might save us a decent amount. Want me to brief you before tomorrow's check-in?" The email was short, professional, no emojis, nothing that HR could ever flag, but he read it 3 times anyway. "Brief me tomorrow at 9, he wrote back. "Thanks for catching it." On Wednesday, he walked past the open door of the project analysis room and saw her inside, leaning over a large map with 2 other analysts. She was pointing at something on the page, explaining they were listening closely. His eyes lingered a second too long at the way she stood, relaxed but grounded, her hand making small, precise gestures. She looked up. Their gazes met. She gave him a brief nod. Nothing more. Anyone watching would have seen nothing unusual. His heart still skipped. On Thursday, he found a small folded note, paper-clipped to one of the reports on his desk, tucked in where only he would see it. The note said, "You were right about phasing the retail first. We'll hit our targets faster. Also, you missed a typo on page 3. Nobody's perfect." He almost smiled in spite of himself. Then he tore the note into small pieces and dropped it in the trash. That night at dinner, Laura asked, "How's that new woman in your department? The one with the sharp cheekbones and the expensive shoes? I saw her in a photo from the event. She stood right behind you on stage." Richard's fork paused midway to his mouth. "She's in project analysis," he said carefully. "Emily. She's good at what she does." "I figured," Laura said. "She has that look." "What look?" Chloe asked, stabbing her salad. "The, I know exactly what I'm doing, And I don't need your permission, look, Laura said. I used to see it in the mirror when I was your age. Chloe rolled her eyes. Mom, you still have that look, she said. Laura laughed. Richard forced his shoulders to stay relaxed. The first text came on Friday. He was in his office, late again. The sunlight had already slid off the glass towers outside. Most of the staff had gone home. The building had that hollow, echoing quiet of after hours. He was reviewing a contract when his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Good evening, Mr. Thompson. It's Emily. I figured texting might be faster than emailing about this, but I can switch if you prefer formal-only channels. The smiley face was the first open crack in the wall of pure professionalism between them since that night. He stared at the screen. There's an issue with the Jackson supplier proposal, and it might affect Westbrook if we're not careful. Can I send you a summary? Or would you rather I bring it by Monday? He typed, You can email the summary. We'll review Monday. He started to put the phone down. It buzzed again. Relax. I'm not going to send you party invitations or memes. Only work. Mostly. He looked up at the closed door of his office, then back at the phone. His thumb hovered for a second. Keep it to work, he wrote. Please. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Of course. You don't have to be afraid of me, Richard. He swallowed. I'm not afraid, he replied. I'm being careful. People are only careful when there's something worth losing, Emily sent back. Good night, boss. He locked his phone and put it face down on the desk. Inside his chest, the careful feeling he had been trying to build all week slipped a little. From then on, their communication became a game of edges. In the office, Emily addressed him as Mr. Thompson, like everyone else. In meetings, she spoke when it was her turn, never more, never less. In front of others, their interactions were clean and unremarkable. But small things added up. Once, in the break room, she walked past him to reach the coffee machine, close enough that her sleeve brushed his. The contact so brief that he almost wondered if he had imagined it. Excuse me, she said, not quite looking at him. Another time, she stayed behind after a meeting with the Westbrook partners. You handled Jensen well, she said as she gathered her notes. He likes to test people. He likes to test me, Richard replied. He doesn't intimidate me, Emily said. You shouldn't let him intimidate you either. Richard raised an eyebrow. He doesn't, he said. We've known each other too long. She smiled. That's good, she said. I'd hate to think the man who owns half the skyline on the east side gets pushed around by his CFO. He almost laughed. On Thursday of the second week, she appeared at his door around lunchtime. Do you ever eat? She asked. Or do you just run on coffee and numbers? I eat, he said. When I remember. Come downstairs, Emily said. There's a food truck outside with decent tacos. My recommendation is practically a guarantee. I have emails, she cut in. Reports. Things that can wait 20 minutes and will still be there when you come back. You tell everyone else that rest is part of performance. Apply your own policy. It was a small rebellion against his usual routine. Nothing inappropriate. People invited their bosses to lunch all the time. He hesitated. Then he stood. All right, he said. 20 minutes. They took the elevator down. The lobby was busy with people in suits and backpacks and delivery uniforms. Outside, the air was cool. The rain had stopped days ago, but the sidewalks still held faint marks of where the water had flowed. The food truck line moved quickly. They ordered. They stood off to the side, under a small awning. Emily took a bite, then closed her eyes for a second. "Okay," she said. "That's almost as good as the hotel bar old-fashioned." He looked at her sharply. She smiled without opening her eyes. "Relax," she said. "I told you. I'm not going to talk about that in the office, even out here." "What are we doing then?" he asked quietly. "Eating lunch," she said, "talking about supply chains and zoning permits and how no one knows how to season chicken properly anymore." "Emily," he said. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I'm not going to chase you," she said in a low voice. "You came to my floor that night. You walked into my room. I didn't drag you." He flinched, just a little. "I know what I did," he said. "Good," she replied. "Clarity is important." She looked back toward the street, at the passing cars. "I'm not asking you to leave your wife," Emily said. "I'm not asking you to blow up your life. I'm not that naive." "Then what are you asking?" he asked. She took another bite, chewed slowly, then answered. "I'm asking you not to pretend that nothing happened," she said. "That's all. Because if you do that, then everything we do will be built on a lie. And lies are expensive." Her choice of words made him think of balance sheets and hidden losses. "I'm also asking," she added, "that you remember who was in the room with you when you make decisions that affect my future here." There it was. Not disguised, not wrapped in romance. Ambition. Plain and simple. "You want a promotion," he said. "I want a seat at the table," Emily replied. "I want to work on the deals that decide who this city belongs to. I want my name on the list when people talk about who made things happen." She wiped her fingers on a napkin, her expression calm. "You can help with that," she said. "Or you can pretend this is all just about spreadsheets and pure, clean business." She looked at him again. "But you and I both know that's not how this world works." Richard felt the ground beneath him tilt another inch. He had taken risks for deals before. He had bent rules, made calls, done what had to be done. None of it had felt like this. None of it had involved sitting under an awning with someone who had seen him vulnerable in a hotel room, asking for something he knew he could give. "How far are you willing to go?" he asked. "To get what I want," she said. He nodded. Her eyes were steady. "As far as I need to," she said. "But I prefer smart moves, not reckless ones. There's a difference between using what you have and burning yourself down." She glanced at his ring again. "You know about that," she said. "Or at least you used to." They finished their lunch in silence. When they walked back into the building, Emily kept a respectful distance. Anyone watching would have seen a boss and an employee returning from a quick break. As they waited for the elevator, she said, just loud enough for him to hear, "I'm not the storm, Richard. I'm the person who knows how to read the weather." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means this city is changing," she said. "The market is changing. Your company will either rise with it or get swallowed by bigger players. You can keep doing what you've always done. Or you can take advantage of the ones who are willing to get their hands a little dirty." Her voice dropped a shade lower. "Just remember who offered you an umbrella," she said, as the elevator doors opened. They stepped in. Other employees joined them. Conversations about payroll and parking filled the space. No one noticed the way Richard's jaw tightened, or the way Emily's fingers relaxed around the strap of her bag, as if she had just placed a piece exactly where she wanted it on a board only she and he could see. That night, when Richard lay in bed beside Laura, the house quiet around them, he stared at the ceiling again. She turned toward him in the dark, resting her hand on his chest. "You've been somewhere else all week," she murmured. "Longer hours, quieter than usual." "Just work," he said. "Westbrook. It's complicated." She listened to his heartbeat for a moment. "Don't do that thing where you carry everything alone," she said softly. "That's how you ended up in the hospital 10 years ago, remember? Stress isn't a trophy." He remembered. The sharp pain in his chest. The tests. The doctor telling him it wasn't a heart attack, just his body finally yelling louder than his ego. "I'm fine," he said. Laura was quiet for a long time. "Do you ever feel like we missed something?" she asked suddenly. "Missed what?" he said. "I don't know," she replied. "When we were younger, we talked about traveling more, about maybe opening a small bookstore someday when you retired, about other versions of our life. And then the company grew, and the kids came, and the years just stacked up. Sometimes I look at us and think, we built so much, but did we forget to live some of it?" Her words were too close to the ones Emily had thrown at him about enough and being in place. Richard swallowed. "We did what we had to do," he said, "to get here." "I know," Laura said, "and I'm grateful. Sometimes I wonder who we'd be if we had taken different risks." In the dark, the rain started again. Light at first, tapping against the bedroom window. Richard closed his eyes. He had taken a different risk. Laura just didn't know. Beside him, his wife eventually drifted to sleep, her breathing deep and even. He lay awake, listening to the rain, and thought of a hotel room, a young woman who was not naive, and the slow, careful way she was beginning to draw him not just into her bed, but into a different kind of danger, one that mixed desire with contracts and pleasure with the quiet shifting of power. Somewhere between those thoughts, he finally slipped into sleep, unaware that in an apartment across town, Emily was sitting at her small kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing numbers and making notes. She wasn't thinking about romance. She was thinking about leverage.